Hey there, good morning. It's the next day. We're going to start the break-in of the stroker engine. After some turmoil and struggles yesterday, finally got it up and running. It starts. That's great news. I'm super excited. So now we got to start the process of breaking the engine in. So what do you say we take it on a little drive and talk about the engine build? I was just starting on my drive and I had to hop out because I didn't have a coolant temperature. So coolant temperature now, got it working. Oil pressure looks good. On my coolant temperature, the issue was that darn little sensor back there that was leaking coolant earlier. I forgot to hook it up, but now we should be good to go, ready to break in the engine. So with the engine break-in, as soon as we start it up, we're immediately supposed to check for oil pressure, make sure we have oil pressure, which we do. If you don't have oil pressure, you gotta shut it off right away. Figure that out, because if you don't have oil pressure, you'll ruin your engine. The other thing I was watching was my engine temperature. My temperature wasn't coming up at all, and I realized I forgot to hook up the sensor. So with the engine break-in, I need to keep the RPMs between 1800 to 2500, up to 3000 for about the first half hour of engine break-in. And we need to break in the camshaft and get the rings on the piston to seat properly to the cylinder walls. Unfortunately, I got this stroker build and I can feel it. It feels like the little bit of power I'm giving it, I can't go crazy with it. But what I am giving it, it feels like it definitely has more power than previously. Unfortunately, I can't push it hard right now. I gotta take it easy, keep it between those RPM ranges for the first half hour. Oh, the other thing, you don't want to let it idle at any particular RPM for very long. You want to be varying the RPMs quite a bit. So we got to just drive it around for about a half hour. Got my cup of coffee, and we'll talk more about the engine build itself, some of the struggles I had with the initial startup. Oh, and yeah, that initial startup, man, why can't my engine startups ever go just first try, bam, got it. This time I was struggling with the timing. So what I was worried about, starting it up, oh, I faced that dilemma, but my family, my daughter, Sasha, she actually made a comment. She's like, Dad, you have such good patience with this. So I'm like, well, what you gonna do? I gotta get it fixed. Throwing a wrench across the room is not gonna help. So what did I do? Initially I was checking, I heard the fuel pump running, so I thought it had fuel supply. I went to the fuel rail and kind of poked at the Schrader valve there, gas squirted out, like there was good pressure there. It's like, okay, I think I have fuel, but I actually took off the air intake real quick and then had Sasha try to start it while I sprayed a little bit of starter fluid into it, and it didn't make a lick of difference. So I'm like, okay, it's not a fuel supply issue because adding fuel, checking the supply made no difference. So then I went over to check spark, so I got fuel, do I have spark? I put a spark tester on it, and it seemed to me like the spark tester was firing pretty good. In the video yesterday though, I think it was kind of firing intermittently when I look back on that video, so that's a little bit of a clue there. I went ahead and cleaned a couple of grounds because that was my issue with my last build when I had the same crank but no start. Oh, that could be so frustrating. But that issue was a ground. So I cleaned a couple grounds, didn't make a bit of difference. Then went back and started fiddling with the timing on the distributor, finding top dead center again. I thought, I just can't get 5 o'clock on piston number, top dead center, piston number 1, rotor aimed towards 5 o'clock position, which should be spark plug number 1. I can't ever get that right, it seems. Seems like my timing is always just a little bit off. So then David stopped by, fortunately, and helped me fiddle with it a bit more, and I actually went out and unbolted the distributor because I thought, okay, I've got compression, I've got spark, I have fuel. It has to be a timing issue, unless it was like crankshaft position sensor, which I've thought about. Those other things, the crankshaft position sensor is one thing that'll also just kill it, prevent it from starting. But I was like, well, let's fiddle with the timing a little bit more. So fortunately, David stopped by and I had him try to start it while I actually unbolted the distributor and just kind of twisted it a little bit. And as I was twisting it, it started to catch and fire and it started. And I was like, okay, shut it off. I was like, okay, this is definitely just a timing issue. I gotta retime the distributor. And with these Jeeps, the only way you can retime the distributor is taking it out and moving it over one tooth and putting it back in, and that'll kind of change where the rotor is, where it's pointed. So did that a few times and we finally got it tuned in right where it is now, so it works great. Now the engine build itself, so this is a 4.6 liter build. I went with the poor man's build. So this is a short rod, bored the cylinders, I think I did them 30 thousandths over, and that with the 4.2 liter crank, that gives me the 4.6 liter stroker. Once I get it broken in here, we'll really be able to test it out at a later date and push it to its limits and kind of see what it does, see what kind of power we really got out of this thing. The build itself, gosh, this was about a year in the making, because I started the build about a year ago. I had this donor engine, little Jeep Wave there, had this donor engine that I started the build on, and then finally a few months ago parked this YJ, which is a 94 YJ, in the shop, pulled it in, its engine out, finished up the stroker, dropped it in. I didn't have quite all the parts ready. Like one thing viewers pointed out was I needed to do the clutch, which yeah, I definitely need to do the clutch on this, but I've got a certain clutch I want. I need to wait for it to come in, so that'll be coming in the future. But yeah, when you got the engine out, doing the clutch, that's the time. The build itself, everything went pretty smooth. Trying to think of, there wasn't any particular part that I struggled with a lot. There are certainly parts that I recommend, yeah, you have a machine shop do, like cleaning the engine itself. You know, they can soak it and hot tank it and cleaning. I've tried cleaning engines myself and I can't do near the job that they can do. So I really like having the machine shop do that, and boring out the cylinder walls 30 thousandths over and honing it. I've tried honing myself and I did like but it's really not that much. If I'm having them bore it out and hot tank the engine, having them hone it, it's really not that much more. So it's well worth having a machine shop do some of those things. The head on it is just my stock head. You know, there's some really nice heads out there. Edinburgh, yeah, right? But they're just so expensive, and this was a cheap build. But all the other work, pretty much did it myself. You can kind of follow all those videos along to see how I did it. It's not that hard when you just research it, do it one step at a time. It's kind of a fun build. If you have a vehicle you can leave for months on end and not worry about it, doing it yourself, not that hard. If I can do it, you can do it. And you can save a ton of money doing the build yourself too. Paying a shop to do everything, it gets expensive quick. It's one reason why I really like doing my own auto repair is, gosh, I bet I've saved $10,000, maybe $20,000 in doing my own auto repair over the years. So yeah, highly recommend learning about your vehicle and doing it yourself. Engine temperature is about 210. Oil pressure looks good, got good volts on my battery. I've got some gas, that's always a plus. So lessons learned or things I would have done different. Obviously getting the timing right on the distributor when I put it in, that's one thing. No, there wasn't really much I would really change though. Those, what were they, E12 bolts, when I was trying to separate the transmission from the engine. Oh, that was a huge headache. When I got it figured out, you know, taking the transmission out with it at the same time, could have done that, but I would have had to drop the skid plate and everything like I did anyways. So I don't know, I guess I wouldn't really change that. I would just get rid of those E12 bolts, hate those things. So I went to the hardware store and got different bolts there. But everything else went pretty smooth, like no big changes that I would really make. So overall, I think this was a super good build. I'm excited to get it broken in, that I can really test it, push it to its limits. And again, thank you guys for following along in the build. It's been a lot of fun.